Stop blinking. It should be live now. So I'm going to pull out my other phone.
So does red mean it's live?
It means it's doing something.
So I'm going to pull out
Hopefully recording, if not live.
Yep. And use some of my precious little data that's left just to confirm.
I really want to peel the sticker off this USB-C cable.
Well, if you think you can do it without wobbling it too much, go for it.
You can do it next time you have to unplug it.
I think it's a sleeve.
No, it's definitely a...
Oh, it's a wrapping around?
But no, I can't do it without fussing with it, and I'm not going to fuss with it, because it is not worth the risk.
Friday, main events, live one.
What's going on in Live 1 right now, Jay?
Oh, wait.
I don't know what next is the
Live one
Genshin
has a guy
Impact
in a blue
though.
shirt talking to a guy in a gray shirt.
Huh?
That's live one right now.
Oh.
I brought up the wrong camera on your screen. So Zenkaikon online, let's look at live 2, where we're standing.
3.
Oh.
Live 3.
We're in live 2, the camera's labeled live 3 because it was live 3 last year. And we have not had time to update.
Is that one labeled Live 2?
Live 3 is not being streamed this year.
Okay.
We only have
Right.
live 1 and live 2.
That's fine.
And we have a label machine. We will update the labels tomorrow.
No, you won't.
I don't know what's going on in there now, but at 5 o'clock it's the Genshin guy.
Yeah, we're live. It's working.
Nope.
Okay, let's go poke our heads back into live 1, and we can do the exact same thing.
Nah, it doesn't work.
We don't need to check the settings on that one because I know they're already correct. I verified that one during the last power cycle. This one's under starter issues.
Did you get a pen?
No, not yet.
Oh.
Thank you so much. I knew I brought something. I just put it over this. If I had it, I would.
No, I'm kidding.
That's not gonna be. My turn. We'll get started shortly. I'm just waiting for somebody to show up to do the live stream. We are experiencing technical difficulties, and I don't know where anybody is.
What's wrong?
It's not doing anything.
It's searching through.
I can't do this panel without my visuals. Because otherwise it's just me talking to you. Nobody wants that.
I think there's a staffer outside you could ask for an AV person to send.
So get somebody.
I just have to be one of these.
Yeah, I got an HDMI port.
Is this is supposed to connect up to.
It's supposed to appear on the screen. I don't know if the problem with the projector or.
There's usually a button.
There you
Oh, there we go.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good now.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we can start now.
Well, not quite.
Not quite? Why?
Don't you need your thing?
I don't know, is it hooked up to the live stream or not?
Oh, no. Quite small.
Okay. Is it up?
Yep. It's a little off center, but it's up. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do anything about that. Okay. Looks like we've got more people coming in again. I just wanted to make sure I was, good to go for the live stream.
So you're able to get your video and everything's up and sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have sound. It's just me. But it wasn't bringing up a picture, and now it is.
Okay, maybe up to that mic?
Mike's okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, no, when the picture wasn't there, that was why we were having
Sure,
problems.
you already have the sound.
Yeah.
Okay, we're having a second one anyways, just to make sure things are good.
Okay.
Thumbs up. Oh, just make sure the sound everything's decent. We just got to call this out, so.
Second one. As long as the picture's working. I don't know about the live stream though.
Live streaming is going to be that camera right there.
Okay, so it is ready to go?
Yeah, it's on.
I don't have to do anything?
No.
Okay.
You take care of it.
Okay, then I guess we're good.
Yeah. Whatever you want to start, I'll be mad at you.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Y'all having a good weekend? Yeah. Good. And hi to everybody on the live stream, which may or may not include my parents, so hi. My name is Laura. I've been coming to Zenkaikon since 2011, and there are very few things in the world that I love more than this convention. But one of them happens to be history. I'm a Pennsylvania history blogger and author, and I'm here to tell you about some of the fascinating things that happened in the history of this beautiful city that Lancaster calls home. I do just want to go over a couple of things before we get started. Except for very few photographs, none of the images in this presentation are my own. They were all cribbed from elsewhere. Please hold all questions until just before the quiz. Yes, there will be a quiz. The quiz is totally optional. Yes, there are prizes. No, you cannot receive the cash value of the prizes instead. The quiz will happen until we run out of prizes, questions, or time, whichever comes first. There are only 10 questions, so it shouldn't take too long. If not fully satisfied with this panel, please return unused portion for a full refund.
Off of Boynton,
Utah.
or Florida.
Is Scott here, by the way, from LP? No? Okay, I have Red Bull for him. I'm not above bribing people to attend my panels. All right. I do have handouts down here. They have some extra information, like places where you can get more knowledge about Lancaster on the web. I only made so many copies, but I have a notebook, that's why I needed a pen. You're welcome to write down your name and email address, and I will gladly send you a PDF, or if you'd rather have the digital copy than the physical one, that's fine too. If anybody on the live stream would like to request a copy, just send me a message in the Con's Discord server or through the Con app. And because I can't resist a good visual pun, I've also brought some Red Rose brand tea bags, so please help yourselves, because we're in the Red Rose City. All right, so anybody here from Lancaster? All right, so you probably know everything. All right, so we're gonna get this out of the way first to break the ice. It is Lancaster, not Lancaster. Yeah. Nobody knows why. Somebody's bringing me donuts.
I'm bribing your audience.
Awesome, thank you. Wait, are you Scott? Yeah. Oh, Andrew, you have his Red Bull? Oh, yeah. She's got it.
This is why I bring the donuts.
Great trade. Thank you, Scott. Let's give a round of applause for Scott.
Please finish them off, otherwise I have to, and I don't think I can do that.
All right, so I tried to find out why it's Lancaster and not Lancaster. Possibly it's because Lancashire in England sounds similar to Lancaster. It's possibly a Pennsylvania Dutch influence, or the most common response seems to be, that's just how we do things around here. And yes, that is a real coaster. You can buy it if you go to Madcap and Company on Queen Street or go on their website. I figured they wouldn't mind my borrowing the image as long as I gave them a plug. All right, so in the beginning, the land was originally inhabited by Native Americans. They were of the Susquehannock tribe, also known as the Conestoga tribe, and it's from them that we get the names of the Susquehanna River and the Conestoga Wagon. Unfortunately, history is not always pretty, it is not always clean, and the Conestogas were wiped out. In 1763, the last surviving members of the tribe were brought to Lancaster because their village was attacked and their homes were burned, and they were put in the jail for safekeeping. But a vigilante group called the Paxton Boys forced their way into the old jail, dragged them out into the street, and butchered them. So there are no more Susquehannocks in Pennsylvania. That's the least pleasant thing I'm going to tell you today, I promise. But I always find that both fascinating and horrible. So, to jump backward in time, William Penn started Pennsylvania because he was given a tract of land by King Charles II of England. Charles didn't really like our William Penn, but he did have a good friendship with his father, and he owed his father money. His father was dead, so he said, here, have some land in the New World. And William said, okay. So he came over here and he established the Providence of Pennsylvania in 1682. People started coming here from all over Europe because it was a region completely free of religious persecution. And if you look around the city of Lancaster, that's a perfect example. There are many, many different denominations of many, many different faiths. Down in the dealer's hall, there's a table for Discover Lancaster. And I was talking with the gentleman down there before I came up here, and he told me that looking out over the city, you will see more different religion steeples than anywhere else in the country. It's that diverse. So William Penn established 3 counties, Bucks, Chester, and Philadelphia. And in 1728, according to the guy from Discover Lancaster, Chester decided that Lancaster County was full of thieves and delinquents, and they didn't want them to be a part of their county anymore, and that's how Lancaster got formed. I don't know if that's true, but it's funny. The Pennsylvania Dutch were the first ones who settled here in the city in 1709. They called it Hickory Town. It became the county seat when they created Lancaster County, and then later John Wright, who was born in Lancaster, England, named the city Lancaster. That was in 1730, and it has been Lancaster ever since. As you might have heard, the Royal House of Lancaster over in England had a red rose as its emblem, and that's why our Lancaster is the Red Rose City. Well, about 90 years after Penn started his experiment here, the 13 colonies decided they were tired of being British dependents, and whoa, get back there. They decided to start calling themselves the United States. They were going to break away, and they set up a national capital in Philadelphia. As you probably learned in school, the British didn't take very kindly to this, and they tried to keep their plans from succeeding. So as part of this effort, they launched an invasion of Philadelphia in the fall of 1777. Since they were living in what were still British colonies, what they were doing was technically treason, and the Continental Congress members had to run for it so that they didn't lose their heads, literally. Fortunately, they got word of this invasion in time that they could get out of Philadelphia. They grabbed the Declaration of Independence and took off. They also tried to save what we now call the Liberty Bell, but it was too heavy and they had to leave it behind. They headed into New Jersey because I guess that's where you go to hide from people, in New Jersey. And then they went north and came back through Pennsylvania in Northampton and Berks counties, and then they finally got to Lancaster. And when I say that they got here, I mean that almost literally. I mean, the convention center obviously wasn't here then, and Zenkaikon certainly wasn't. But if you go outside, you know that Soldiers and Sailors Monument in the middle of the square? That was where the courthouse was situated. So when they got here, they set up shop in the old courthouse, and they were running the country from that spot. They stayed there for an entire day. Literally. Lancaster was the capital of the United States for one day on September 27th, 1777. And And then the next day they said, you know what, we should probably keep moving because the Susquehanna River is a little hard to cross, and I bet the redcoats won't chase us, so let's go to York. So that picture on the left was drawn I don't know when, by William Teft Schwartz. Comes to us from uncharted Lancaster, excuse me. The building was erected in 1739, and then that's my picture of the square as it looks today. The building in the background there, which is the Lancaster City Visitors Center, is also seen in the picture to the left of the courthouse. So you can get an idea of the vantage point. It's almost the same. I was at the Lancaster Visitors Center earlier today. There are brochures and maps down here for anybody who wants them. They were very excited to hear about this panel. I hope people show up. Yeah, so do I. So thank you for coming. All right, so the Continental Congress were able to return to Philadelphia the following July, 1778. All right, this courthouse burned in 1784, the first one. They built a second one on the same spot, and after the War for Independence was won, Lancaster was made the state capital, and it stayed as the state capital until 1812, at which point they moved it to Harrisburg. It's a little more central to the state, but the courthouse served as the Capitol building. So we're in what used to be the nation's capital, we're in what used to be the state capital, and now we're just in the capital of Zenkaikon.
We moved up for the world.
There you go. 1835, I love this story. If you want to read more detail on this story, there is a sign outside in Penn Square talking about it. That's where I got the information. You can see illustrations and stuff. But there were two slave women who had escaped from the South and were living in Lancaster as free women. They were married, and the two of them, plus one of their sons, were captured by bounty hunters. The bounty hunters intended to take them back to the South and give them back to the people who used to own them. So they put them in the jail to hold them until then. But the next day they were gone, and they were just passed around from safe house to safe house until the bounty hunters gave up and went home. And they had this thrilling story of how they forced their way out at knife point, and they wouldn't take no for an answer, and they were going to kill anybody who got in their way. Years later, on his deathbed, the sheriff of the county of Lancaster confessed that that's not what happened, but that's what he told them to say. What really happened was that he unlocked the door and told them to run. But he didn't want to get in trouble, so he said, just tell them you threatened my life. So I love that story because it's such a cool story, and it gives you an example of how the tensions were brewing here between the North and the South. Lancaster was a frequent stop on the Underground Railroad because of how close it is to the Mason-Dixon line. The jail where those ladies escaped from was torn down in 1851 because it was getting too small for the purpose, unfortunately. They built a new one on East Orange Street, and where the old jail stood was where they built the Fulton Opera House, if anybody has seen that. It's the Fulton Theater today, named after Robert Fulton, who was a Lancaster native, and he built the first functioning steamboat. That gentleman downstairs from Discover Lancaster told me a very fun story before I came up here. Y'all know who Milton Hershey is? Yeah, you like Hershey chocolate? Okay, well, Milton was from Lancaster. And his original company was called the Lancaster Caramel Company, in fact. But when he was a teenager, he worked at the Fulton Opera House in the literal peanut gallery, roasting peanuts. And apparently, he was about 16 or so. One night, he was roasting the peanuts, and he got so interested in the show that he forgot to pay attention to the peanuts, and he almost burned the entire building down. Yeah. All right, so the courthouse was demolished in 1852. That's why it's no longer out there. They rebuilt it over on Duke Street at its present location, so Lancaster is still on its third courthouse. But if you'd like to see a small-scale replica of that second one, you can go over to Buchanan Park, which is next to Franklin and Marshall College here in Lancaster, and they have a model of the old courthouse there. It used to stand outside the convention center, actually. During the World Wars, they used it as a driving place for Liberty Bonds. All right, so tensions were brewing between northern and southern states, and we had two prominent citizens of Lancaster who didn't really like each other very much. Anybody know who I might mean? Want to take a guess? No? Okay.
One of them, Thaddeus Stevens.
One of them was Thaddeus Stevens. He's my hero. The other was James Buchanan. So, yeah, they were here around the same time. They had almost as much in common as they had different, but they didn't like each other, and I think you'll understand why when I tell you about them. James Buchanan was the first person born in Pennsylvania to be the President of the United States. He was our only bachelor president to date. He never married, but it's not commonly known. He was actually engaged in his youth to a young woman. Her name was Anne Caroline Coleman. Buchanan was in law, and Anne's problem with that was that he paid more attention to his career than he did to her. And so they dissolved the engagement, and she went down to Philadelphia, where she died. Her death was ruled an accident, but nobody knows for sure if it was an accident or an accident, because they think that she may have accidentally on purpose walked in front of the carriage out of a broken heart. In any case, that's what her father believed. He blamed Buchanan for her death, wouldn't let him come to the funeral, and set out to make his life miserable. He ruined his law career, and that's how Buchanan ended up going into politics. So it's because of all of that that we got Buchanan as the 15th president. He may have been gay or bisexual because he had a long-standing close relationship with another politician by the last name of King. King referred to their relationship as a communion. They were often accused of having a relationship at any rate. Nobody knows for sure because their letters to each other were burned after they died as per their own wishes. So we'll never know. I'm going to switch over here. This is a comparison between the two guys. He was a dope-face, which is a northerner with southern sympathies. He didn't personally support slavery, but he didn't know how to eradicate it without causing more problems. He was also a staunch Democrat and a Freemason. He had no children of his own, but he had several younger brothers and sisters, most of whom died before him, and he adopted 2 of his nibblings after the deaths of their parents. One fun fact about him, he was nearsighted in one eye and farsighted in the other eye. So if he wanted to focus on something, he had to close one eye and pay attention with the other one. All right, now Thaddeus Stevens, on the other hand, was born in Vermont. He moved here as an adult. First he lived in Gettysburg, and then he came here to Lancaster. He is a favorite of mine. I'm going to try not to gush too much. But he was the pioneer of public schooling in Pennsylvania, which he personally considered the highlight of his career. He considered that the best thing he ever did. He was a firm supporter of Abraham Lincoln, a successful lawyer, and what they called a radical Republican. He wasn't just a regular Republican, he was radical about it. But you have to remember, in those days, what we now consider a Republican was really more of a Democrat, and what we consider a Democrat was more of a Republican. They kind of switched sides at some point. He hated the Freemasons. Remember I said Buchanan was a Mason? He hated the Freemasons. And he had a good reason, because he had a club foot, Thaddeus. He wore heavy boots to try to conceal it, but he was born with club foot. And the Freemasons at that time had a rule: you could not join if you had any kind of a disability. As somebody who has multiple disabilities, I'm also pissed off with that. So I don't blame him for being angry. I don't know enough about the Masons to know if that's still true. I would hope it's not. Like Buchanan, he never married, but unlike Buchanan, he was never suspected of preferring men. Instead, he was accused of having his housekeeper as a common law wife. Most historians think it's probable that he was actually asexual. Like Buchanan, he also never had children, but he adopted 2 of his nephews after their parents died. One of them was killed in the Civil War, so he kind of took extra steps to make sure the other one never got sent into battle. As congressman, he wrote the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. His fun fact is that because he suffered a serious illness as a young man, he went completely bald in his 20s. And that's why he wore wigs for the rest of his life, most of which didn't fit very well. There's actually a story out there about him having a young female admirer during his time in Washington, and she requested a lock of his hair, and he pulled off the wig and told her to pick which one she wanted. I don't know if that's true, but it's very much in line with his sense of humor. All right, these are pictures of their houses. The one there on the left, the one on the left is my photograph. That is Wheatland, and it is today a museum. It's a Georgian-style mansion owned by Lancaster History. That's one word. You can visit it over on Marietta Avenue. You have to buy the tickets at the Lancaster History headquarters, and it's still containing a lot of the things that belonged to Buchanan and his niece and nephew when they lived there. It passed out of the family Sometime later, when Harriet was an adult, his niece inherited the house, but she later sold it. And it was only during the last 50-odd years that a movement was made to reclaim ownership for the city and maintain it as a museum. Thaddeus Stevens House is not a museum yet. It's going to be one. They call it the Stevens and Smith Historic Site. They're expecting to open it sometime in the next couple of years. I'm hoping to make this an annual panel if there's enough interest, so hopefully next year I'll be able to come back and tell you when you'll be able to go visit. But it might look a little familiar to you. You see that glass on the left side? You know what that is?
That's where we are.
That's where we are, yeah. We're basically sitting in his backyard. They were going to demolish the house, actually, to make way for the convention center, and somebody was able to step in and say, no, are you nuts? That belonged to Thaddeus Stevens, leave it alone. So instead, they sort of incorporated it into the convention center. If you go down, you know where we got our badges? There are those big windows that most people don't even look twice at. Look in them, you can look down, you see his basement. There is a cistern down there. They're currently working on excavating it and pulling out relics. They think that is where he personally concealed slaves on the Underground Railroad, because he was that opposed to slavery. He also employed spies who went around the city of Lancaster getting him information about when bounty hunters were expected to come to town and who they were after, and he was able to pass that information on. He was never caught. His spies were never caught. They were that good. Again, if you go out to Penn Square, there is signage that tells you all about this, so it's really interesting to hear and read. Buchanan's and Stevens are both buried here in Lancaster. These are my photographs. Buchanan's tomb is in the Woodward Hill Cemetery on Queen Street. Now the reason that's all festooned is because every year, except for a couple of years during COVID, the nation performs a wreath-laying ceremony at the tomb of every president on his birthday. So this is from the birthday celebration of James Buchanan last year. Stevens, meanwhile, is buried at the Shriner-Concord Cemetery, which is at the intersection of Mulberry and Chestnut Streets. And he specifically chose that as his place of burial because it was a cemetery that allowed anyone to be buried there regardless of their race. And they also have an annual ceremony on his birthday, or close to it, sponsored by the Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. He was one of the founders of that school, which was the Institute of Industry or something like that when it was founded. They changed the name later, but they still honor him with the name. So you can pay your respects to either or both of them. Before I get completely off their topic, I promise this whole panel is not about Buchanan and Stevens. But I do want to talk about the two special women in their lives because they were very important to Lancaster in their own right. And I don't have enough women in this panel, quite frankly. Harriet Lane, there on the left, was the niece that Buchanan adopted after her parents died. She was 11 years old. She called him Nunk, and he called her Hal. And she was absolutely devoted to him. For the rest of his life, he called her his adopted daughter. She was pretty, she was charismatic, extremely intelligent, spoke multiple languages. She accompanied him to England when he was there as an ambassador and became a close personal friend of Queen Victoria. Buchanan also adopted one of her cousins, James Buchanan Henry, whom they called Buck. And they lived with him at Wheatland with his housekeeper. He referred to the three of them as his little family. So when he became president, he took the kids off to Washington. Buck became what today we know as the White House Chief of Staff. And Harriet was the White House hostess, which didn't technically have a title at that time. And nobody quite knew what to call her because she was obviously not Mrs. Buchanan. He was the first unmarried president. So they gave her the name in the newspapers as First Lady in the Land, and that's where the term comes from. She was the first official First Lady. Her life was actually very sad because not only did she lose her parents when she was only 11, she outlived all 5 of her brothers and her only sister. She buried her favorite uncle, of course. He left her Wheatland. Most of the furnishings were left to Buck, but she got the house. And she and her family used it as a summer home. She married in her 30s. She married for love. 2 very unusual things for the time period. She and her husband had 2 sons, the older of whom was named after James Buchanan. They both died when they were children from, I think it was typhoid fever. And then she and her husband were facing this life alone together, and then her husband also died. He had minor surgery and unexpectedly died from complications. So she was a relatively young, childless widow, and she was too depressed to go back to Wheatland, so she sold it. She was too depressed to go back to her house in Baltimore. She sold that too, and she moved back to Washington, D.C., where she was part of the social circle. She left her vast fortune to many charities, and her personal art collection became the start of the National Art Gallery in Washington, D.C. So we have Harriet to thank for the fact that we have the National Gallery. Now this other lady here is Lydia Hamilton Smith. She was the longtime housekeeper, financer, household manager, and personal confidant of Thaddeus Stevens. She was married, that's why her last name there is Smith. I didn't tell you to go ahead. He stubbornly addressed her as Mrs. Smith at all times. She and her husband were estranged, so she lived with Thaddeus Stevens and her 2 sons, whom he helped her raise. And then when his nephews moved in, she helped him raise them. And that's probably part of why people thought she was his common-law wife. He never dignified that with a response. So it's unlikely that we will ever know the exact nature of their relationship, but he did treat her with absolute utmost respect. And if you came to his house, he expected you to do the same. She ran his household, looked after him personally, and worked with him to help slaves find their way to freedom. She helped him hide people on the Underground Railroad. Like I said, the common theory is that he was actually asexual, so the prevailing theory is that he didn't, dignify the accusations with a response because he was using that as his cover. Well, if people think I'm married to Mrs. Smith, they're not going to badger me to take a wife. So she was at his bedside when he died in Washington, D.C. He was only the 3rd person in history to lie in state in the Capitol building rotunda before his funeral. He left her quite a bit of money in his will, and she used a lot of it to buy that house that is out back. And later she became one of Lancaster's first prominent female business owners because she ran a successful tavern. So she was very interesting in her own right. She was half black and half Irish. So, now of course they weren't the only significant names in Lancaster during the Civil War. Anybody here want to hear a ghostly love story? Sure. Yeah? Okay. I was hoping. This fine fellow here is John F. Reynolds. He was born over on King Street, and the pretty lady next to him was Kate Hewitt. John graduated from West Point and became an officer in the Union Army, and he was secretly dating Kate when he was here at home in Lancaster. The reason it was a secret is because he was a Protestant and she was a Catholic, and that wasn't going to go over well with either of their families. So they had to keep it very quiet. But then the war broke out. He was being sent to battle. So before he left, he asked her to marry him. Of course, she said yes. He gave her his West Point class ring as a token of their engagement. She gave him a medallion to wear into battle, which she hoped would protect him. She also promised that if he did not return, she was going to become a nun. Spoiler alert, he did not return. Well, rather he did. First he was okay. He went to a couple different battles. He served very well. He was extremely highly regarded by everybody who knew him. Even the Confederates had nothing bad to say about him. He was once taken prisoner while he was asleep, and they treated him very well until he was released in a prisoner exchange because they respected him so much. But then we had July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1863. Does anybody know what happened on those dates? Battle of Gettysburg, exactly right. John was the very first casualty of the battle. He was the highest ranked officer to die on those days, and he bit the dust first thing in the morning on July 1st. He was on horseback, directing troops. Nobody knows who shot him because a couple different people tried to take credit for it. Most people think that he was probably hit by a sharpshooter who was either hiding in a tree or a local barn because the battle took place on farm fields. But it's also possible that he just got hit by a very lucky random shot. He was on horseback directing people, and his last words were, "Forward, men! Forward, for God's sake!" I don't know who wrote that down, but it's on the wall in the Museum of Gettysburg, so it must be true. And then he was shot in the neck, and he fell out of his horse's saddle, and he bled out in minutes. So some of his men managed to get him off the field almost immediately, which was very unusual for the war. And a couple of his personal staff members brought him back here to Gettysburg. His parents had already died, but his sisters met them at the train station to recover his body. And then Kate came and she said, yeah, I'm here to tell you the truth. I was going to marry him. Look, I have his West Point class ring. That's my proof that I was engaged to him. I'm really sorry. My heart is broken. Please let me be part of his funeral service. And they did. His funeral was so large that they actually held it at the Felton Opera House. His body lay there all night before the service, and she sat up with him all night, would not leave him. After he was buried, she went to Maryland to become a nun, just like she promised, and she lasted about 6 weeks or so, and they told her to leave. Because she was grieving so extensively for a man to whom she had not been married and who was not a member of her family, that they said, look, this is not going to work because you're grieving too much and it's getting in the way of your devotions, so please go find something else to do with your life. So she went to New York. She just could not come back here, and she became a school teacher. She eventually died in New York from pneumonia. She's buried up there, and she never married. She remained faithful to John to the rest of her life. But the story doesn't end there, because Kate's endless mourning, it is said, has kept John from resting in peace. And there are a number of people, both residents of Lancaster and visitors, who have claimed that when they're outside his house on King Street, where he grew up, they felt an unseasonable chill. And others have seen him walking on the streets between his house and the Fulton Opera House. And they say it's a tall man in Civil War era clothing, and he doesn't talk to anybody, he just vanishes. And they think he is looking for Kate. He's trying to fulfill the promise he made to marry her when the war was over. So, I don't know if you will see the ghost. I'm not promising you that. I haven't seen him, but I haven't gone looking either. But you can see him if you go across the square. I mean, you can't see him, but if you go across the square, the Lancaster City Visitor Center is open. I forget the exact hours, but it's in this handout. And they have this little gallery of pictures, a couple of which will talk. It's like going to Hogwarts, except they're all historical figures. It's Buchanan, Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Smith, John Reynolds, and the artist Charles Demuth. And if you're there long enough, they suddenly wake up and start interacting with each other. Stevens and Buchanan quarrel. It's really funny. Smith reins him in, and he goes, "Quite right, Mrs. Smith," and gets back to normal. It's really funny. And John F. Reynolds is one of the guys. Most of the, I don't know for sure about Lydia Smith, but most of them actually really do look like the people they're supposed to be performing. Like the Thaddeus Stevens actor is uncanny. If I didn't know he didn't have kids, I'd swear it was a descendant. But yeah, so you can go and listen to them talk about their stories in their own words. And Lancaster is just full of stories like this. I mean, if I can quote from my absolute favorite fictional character of all time, that's all history is, just the best tales. Does anybody know who that was? Okay, I guess you guys don't play Dragon Age. That was Varric. So yeah, I mean, Lancaster has a ton of stories, and I could sit here all day telling you these stories. Andrew Ellicott was a master surveyor. He lived here in Lancaster. Meriwether Lewis came to him before the Lewis and Clark expedition and said, "Teach me what I need to know to become a surveyor, because they're sending me out west, and I need to talk about what I find and what I learn. I need to be able to bring this information back. I need to give good data." So he had Meriwether Lewis as a student. His home is occasionally open for visits. Then we also have, I mentioned Charles Demuth, who's over in the picture gallery. His family lived here for several generations on King Street. They owned a tobacco shop, which was frequented by many of the men that I've already mentioned. It was founded by his great-great-grandfather. And Charles was very sickly as a child, and he did not take over the family business. He didn't get to do much of anything, but to keep him entertained while he was recovering from his illness, they gave him a watercolor set. And he became an artist. He went to Paris and studied there, and he was an important figure in the Precisionist movement. But he also still loved Lancaster, and a lot of his work is based on scenes he saw in Lancaster. One of his most famous pictures is called My Egypt, and it's a picture of some silos on farms on the farm here in Lancaster County. Joseph Simon was a leader in the Jewish community here in Lancaster in the colonial era. And we're also sitting on his property, because before the hotel was built, he owned a shop that was right here. He was a merchant. His granddaughter, Rebecca, was the inspiration for the character of Rebecca in the novel Ivanhoe. If you've ever read that, Rebecca in the book is a Jewish woman, and Ivanhoe defends her. And that's just people. We have the Lancaster Central Market, which opened in 1731. Was anybody there today? Yeah, me too. I love the market. I go there every time I come here, unless it's not open. And it was built in 1731. It is the oldest continuously operating farmers market in the United States. Lancaster itself is the oldest city in the United States that does not have a coast. It is the oldest inland city in the US. It's the birthplace of the Conestoga wagon and the Pennsylvania long rifle. And as I said, Milton Hershey had his first factory here. And marshmallow peeps. Anybody like marshmallow peeps? My grandmother used to blow one up in the microwave every Easter. It was her tradition. When she passed away the week before Easter, we blew one up in her memory. They were invented here. They're now made in Bethlehem, which is close to where I live, but they were first made here. And that's Lancaster City. If you go farther out into the county, you can visit the Julius Sturgis original pretzel bakery. It's the oldest pretzel company in the US. The original bakery is no longer used as a bakery, but it does have a really fun tour. It's only a few dollars, and you get pretzels at the end of it. You can't go wrong. Linden Hall, which is also in Lidditz, down the street from the Sturgis place, is the oldest continually operating boarding school for girls in the US. It was founded by the Moravians. There is so much fascinating stuff here, and I don't want to run out of time, and I don't want to babble on forever, but I could. I think some people I know are glad that I'm here because I'm finally getting it out of my system. Before we move on, does anybody have a question? Yes?
When you said the Pennsylvania long rifle was born here, do we know, do you mean like somebody, the inventor lived here, or the first one was made here?
The first one was made here. The first Pennsylvania long rifle was made here. If you go to Lancaster History, the building, it's called the Lancaster Campus of History, really. They have a museum on site, and that's actually where I learned that fact, because they have one of the rifles on display with information about it. There was one over here? Thought I saw a hand. No? Yeah? I would love to do the panel again next year if you guys will come. Yeah? Okay. Give me a 5-star rating in the app. That'll help. I'll share my donuts. Like I said, I am a blogger. I do have my contact information in the handout, but I also have business cards. And take two, they're small. Every week I write a new article about Pennsylvania history, so if you want to keep learning while you're waiting for the panel to appear again next year, you can definitely check that out. And definitely check out the other places in the handout. All right. So there are actually a few more of you than I thought there would be. So I went over to the Lancaster City Visitor Center, and like I said, I mentioned the panels to them. They sent along some brochures and maps that you are welcome to help yourselves to, and I got the prizes there. And what I have 9 questions that are based on something I said in the last however long I've been talking, and 1 question that is not. So first person to get each question right can come up and pick one of the prizes that I have on the step here. Let's try to give them all to different people because I only have so many. And then I have a grand prize for whoever gets the question that I didn't include in the panel because I wasn't sure what else to ask. All right, so first question. What was the original name of the city of Lancaster? With the horns. Hickorytown, come on up. Good job. Hickorytown. That's what the Pennsylvania Dutch called it. The gentleman from Discover Lancaster asked me that if I knew the answer to that question. I didn't tell him it was in the quiz, but I came out with it so fast that I think he was confused. How did you know that? He even said to me, I'm so excited to talk to somebody who actually likes this stuff. My wife is just like, yeah, whatever, get out of my face. All right. How long was Lancaster the capital city of the United States? Yes?
1 day.
1 day. September 27th, 1777. You're welcome. Thank you. How many courthouses have there been in the city of Lancaster? Gentlemen here. Yeah.
3.
3. That's right. We had the original that burned, the second one that was torn down, and the current one today. The rose emblem I nicked from the Lancaster official website, so please don't tell them. I don't think they'd mind, but the screens look so blank with nothing but words. Which building was replaced with the Fulton Opera House? You had your hand up first. What's that?
The jailhouse.
The jailhouse, that's right. The old jail. There are historical markers over there for both the old jail and the Fulton Opera House. And I know this because I already wrote about them in my blog. Their stories were so tied together that it didn't make sense to write about them separately. But there is actually a statue of Robert Fulton on the front of the building. It's made of stone now. They had an original made of wood, and they took it down and they refurbished it, and it's on display in the lobby. Unfortunately, I visited during the pandemic, so I wasn't allowed to go inside. I'd love to see the inside sometime. It is an extremely accessible venue. I learned this. They have special accommodations not only for those in wheelchairs, but also for the blind and the deaf. Who was James Buchanan's first lady when he was president? Yes?
Harriet, and I'm forgetting her last name.
I'll give it to you. Harriet Lane, his niece, yes. Yes, she became Harriet Lane Johnston. If you're familiar with Johns Hopkins, she actually founded their Children's Disease Research Center because of the illness that her sons died from. They have, over at Wheatland, they have her piano on display, and on the wall are autographed pictures of Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert. Because when their son, the Prince of Wales, was growing up, they sent him to America as part of an educational tour, and he visited the Buchanan household, and she accompanied him to Washington's tomb, actually, and he brought these pictures that his parents had signed for her. So they have really unusual provenance. Which constitutional amendment was authored by Thaddeus Stevens? Yes, the 14th. Do you know what that says? Does anybody know what the 14th Amendment says? Yeah.
Isn't that the one that outlawed slaves? No. It's the one that... Dang it. Is it the one that outlawed slavery?
It didn't outlaw slavery exactly.
Okay.
It granted citizenship to all the freed slaves.
Yeah.
If you were born in the United States, you were automatically a citizen. The 14th Amendment was actually not, the finished version was not what Thaddeus Stevens wanted it to be, and he was very disappointed. He went on record as saying, yeah, it's not what it should have been, but I have to, I love this quote, he says, I must account for the fact that I live among men and not angels. So it's not perfect, but it's as close as I could get with what I had to work with. He really did not understand the value of everything he contributed. He only thought that making Pennsylvania schools available to everybody was the one good thing he did in his life. All right. Now, which Lancaster native was the first casualty at the Battle of Gettysburg? All the way in the back. John Reynolds, yes. General John F. Reynolds. And they have a big to-do about him in the Gettysburg Museum, as I said. We went there for my birthday a couple of years ago. They have a big picture of him. They have a big frame, a big display of his last words. And there are actually multiple memorials to him. He's buried here in Lancaster, so he has that. He also has a big statue in the Gettysburg Cemetery. And there's even a statue of him outside City Hall down in Philadelphia. I'm not sure why. The other two I get. I'm not sure why he's in Philadelphia. All right.
It goes. Stands there.
That must be it. The ghost is down there. In what year did the Lancaster Central Market open? Yes. No. Yes.
1733.
You're close.
1731.
1731. Very good. I know, nobody told you guys to take notes. It's okay. That might be the second last question. How many prizes do you have? There's 2 more cards? Okay, we got 2 more questions. Oh. Okay, so there's 1 left? Okay, and then we have the grand prize. Grand prize. All right. Oh, no, I guess I bought too many prizes. Most important piece of historical data. In what year did Zenkaikon come to Lancaster? Who did I not call on? The person with the teeth.
2013.
2013. You get the most useful prize of all. You get a raincoat. Yes. glad you all participated. Does anybody have any more questions? Because I think I have a lot of time to kill. Yes?
I can't quite recall this. Do you remember what the facade of the prison is based on specifically?
What the what?
The facade of the prison. Lancaster prison.
The facade of the prison?
Yes. It's a castle, but I forget which one. It might be Tudor Castle, maybe?
Oh, okay. That's possible. A lot of the old prisons are modeled after castles. Some of them are still standing. I don't know because I've never seen a picture of the old jail.
Oh, no, it's the current one.
Oh, the current one. Oh,
yeah.
I have seen that one. That is beautiful. It kind of, just going off my own memory, it kind of looks a bit like Buckingham, but I don't know for sure. That's a good question. I wish I had an answer for you. I'm sure it's on Google somewhere. Anybody else? Please help me. Otherwise, I'll have to find more things to tell you. Yes?
When did Amish people start settling around here?
Good question. I'm not 100% sure because it's a little muddled with the Amish and the Mennonite and the Pennsylvania Dutch. We do know that the the Germans came here in about 1709 and started settling. And I remember that very clearly because my own German ancestor came here in 1710. So I'm Pennsylvania Dutch. But when they became like the distinct communities is harder to say because they are so disparate, but they also have very similar roots and came from the same sort of area. But there is one of the resources in the handout I have here is about Mennonite life, and I know that would be able to answer the question about the Mennonites, so they might be able to give you that answer as well, especially if the Mennonites broke away from the Amish, which I think they may have done, but I'm a little fuzzy on that. They don't have too many historical markers. What time is it? 5:30. Oh, Lord. I have 45 minutes yet? Okay, I definitely over budgeted for how long I was going to be talking. Yes?
Not a question exactly, but an interesting fact about Lancaster.
Okay.
Basically the premier Rolex repair facility in the United States is located here.
Really?
Yep, up in Libbets.
Wow.
It's a very interesting building. It's like an industrial interpretation of a barn. It's got a silo and everything.
No kidding.
And it's the site of the main repair center and a exclusive training school for repairing Rolex watches.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the premier Rolex repair facility is here in Lancaster.
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that one.
They talked, one guy did an article with them and they mentioned like celebrity watches come here.
Oh, wow. Does anybody else have any cool Lancaster facts they'd like to share? Yes?
Did you know that the Marriott actually used to be a Woolworths?
Say that again?
It used to be a Woolworths.
There used to be a Woolworths?
Marriott.
Oh, the Marriott was a Woolworths. Oh, wow. Before it was a hotel.
Before it turned into a Marriott.
Okay, wow. No, I did not know that. That's neat. Yes?
My fun fact is that it's actually pronounced Lancaster.
Oh! Oh, this one, he's in trouble. Oh my God. Okay, I promise next year I will only put in for an hour. I didn't know how long it was going to end up taking, so I went for an hour and a half just to be on the safe side. I forgot that I talk fast. But I love hearing more Lancaster facts, so please tell me more.
It's not necessarily a Lancaster fact, but I'm from Nazareth, North Dakota.
Yeah.
And they're also they use the red rose as well.
Really?
For a slightly different reason. Landman's daughter, Letitia Ben, was given 5,000 acres, which is the area of Lake Nazareth.
Okay.
In the Lancaster Sea. And the only thing that she had to do was give him one red rose every year. I think it was on the 24th, June 24th.
Oh, wow. Okay, I don't live too far from Nazareth, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Nazareth, the rent in Nazareth is one red rose? Who pays that? Oh my gosh, that is cool. So there's another red rose sitting here. All right. Who else knows something cool to share? All right. Yes.
Okay, I don't know if this is like partially a question and partially like just some fun fact.
All right.
Lancaster borders York County, right?
Yes.
The House of York actually fought House of Lancaster
Yes.
in the War of the Roses. They
Yes.
used the white rose, Lancaster used the red rose.
That's correct.
Is that a coincidence?
No.
No. They
No,
just
they-
decided
they-
gotta
they-
be funny or something.
They pretty much. They just wanted to. What happened was a lot of English settlers came here from Lancaster, and that's how they got its name. Others came from York, and that's how it got its name. And then eventually, York County was formed out of Lancaster County.
Oh.
So York is the white rose city. You go there, they have the white rose emblem going on, just like Lancaster has the red rose emblem.
And we hate them. No.
And if you go to England, they've got the Tudor rose, which is both in one. But yes, you're right about that. What's that? I thought I heard something. Oh, so you heard something? No? Oh, all right. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Please have some tea bags. Thank you. I really